feel abandoned. There was no moment I could point to, no fight, no betrayal, just a quiet shift where I realized I wasn't where he went anymore. I was still there, still loving, still waiting, but his attention, his presence seemed to land somewhere else. And the hardest part wasn't not knowing where it went. It was wondering if what I felt was even real enough to matter. If you've ever stayed in some things that looked fine from the outside, but slowly stopped feeling like home on the inside, this story might sound familiar. In the beginning, nothing was missing. At least, that's what I told myself. We met in a way that didn't feel dramatic or destined, no sparks, no story I would later retell with exaggeration. Just two people who found each other easy to be around. He wasn't loud, I wasn't either. We liked the same quiet places, the kind where conversations didn't have to fill every second, where silence wasn't awkward, just there. From the outside, it looked simple, healthy even. He showed up, he answered messages, he remembered my coffee order. There was nothing obviously wrong, and maybe that's why I stayed so long. Because when there is no clear problem, you don't know what you're supposed to fix. In those early months, I learned the rhythm of him. How he moved through rooms, how he listened with his head slightly tilted, like he was really paying attention, how he'd reach for my hand without looking, as if it was already a habit. I liked how steady he felt. There was comfort in knowing he wouldn't disappear suddenly, comfort in predictability. I didn't need fireworks, I just wanted to feel chosen, and back then I thought I was. Sometimes he would be quiet for long stretches, not distant, just quiet. He'd sit on the couch scrolling through his phone, legs crossed, brow relaxed, not tense, not hiding, just somewhere else. I told myself this was normal. Everyone has their inner world. I didn't want to be the kind of person who needed constant reassurance. I prided myself on being low maintenance, independent, understanding. So I learned how to sit next to him without interrupting his silence. I learned how to wait. Waiting became something I did without noticing. Waiting for him to finish what he was reading. Waiting for him to look up. Waiting for the moment when his attention would return to the room we were in together. It usually did, eventually, and when it did, I felt relief, which I mistook for closeness. There were no arguments about time, no accusations, no "you're never here" conversations. I didn't want to create problems where there weren't any. Instead, I adjusted. If he seemed tired, I spoke less. If he seemed distracted, I filled the space with small, harmless talk, things that didn't require much from him. I became good at sensing when to pull back. I thought that was love. At night, we lay side by side, our bodies close, familiar. He fell asleep quickly, always before me. I would listen to his breathing slow, deepen, soften. There was something comforting about that sound, proof that he was there. I told myself, this is what peace looks like. And yet, sometimes I'd stare at the ceiling and feel a faint, unnameable loneliness, not sharp enough to hurt, just present enough to notice, like a draft you feel but can't find the source of. I didn't question it. I told myself every relationship has quiet nights. Every couple has moments where one person drifts inward. I didn't need to be his entire world. I just wanted to feel like I was part of it. And I thought I was. He never made me feel unimportant on purpose. That mattered to me. He wasn't cruel. He didn't belittle me. He didn't ignore me outright. He simply wasn't always there, not fully. But how do you complain about absence when someone is physically beside you? How do you name a loss that hasn't officially happened? There was a moment, small, forgettable, when I first noticed something shift. We were at a cafe we'd been to many times before. Same corner table, same soft light, same background noise of cups and low conversation. He sat across from me, phone on the table, face down. I remember noticing that, because usually he left it in his pocket. He talked. I listened. Then, halfway through my sentence, he reached for the phone. Just a quick glance. No apology, no explanation. It was nothing. I kept talking, but something in me paused, not stopped, just slowed, as if a small part of me had stepped back to watch. I remember thinking, that's new, and then immediately thinking, it doesn't mean anything, so I let it go. Moments like that didn't happen often, but they happened enough that I started collecting them without realizing it. Not consciously, not suspiciously, just noticing. The way his attention seemed divided even when there was no clear reason. The way his laughter sometimes arrived a second too late, like he was catching up. The way he'd say, "Sorry, what were you saying?" more than he used to. I never accused him. I answered softly, repeated myself. I didn't want to be a burden. I told myself this was maturity, that relationships weren't about constant intensity, that love could be quiet, and it was quiet. So quiet that sometimes I wondered if I was imagining the emptiness. Every so often, I asked myself a small question. Am I asking for too much? I didn't answer it. I just adjusted again. We still did all the normal things: groceries, weekend plans, late night snacks. He still held my hand when we crossed the street. Still asked if I got home safe. Still remembered things that mattered, which made it harder to explain the feeling that something was slowly slipping. Because how could something be wrong when everything looked right? I never felt replaced. Not exactly. There was no name, no face, no other person I could point to. Just a vague sense that I was no longer the place his attention naturally landed. Like a favorite chair that was still there, still comfortable, just not the first one he chose anymore. Sometimes, when he smiled at his phone, I felt a flicker of curiosity. Not jealousy, just wondering. What was so engaging? Who or what held that part of him so completely? I never asked. I didn't want to sound insecure. I trusted him. I trusted us. Trust can be quiet too, sometimes too quiet. One evening, we cooked dinner together. Or rather, I cooked, and he stood nearby. He leaned against the counter, scrolling, occasionally glancing up. I told him about my day. Nothing dramatic, just small details. He nodded, smiled at the right places, but his eyes didn't stay on me, not for long. I kept talking anyway, because stopping felt worse. Halfway through, I asked myself another small question. If I stopped speaking right now, would he notice? I didn't test it. I finished my story. I told myself this was temporary, that stress came and went, that people moved in cycles. I told myself I was being patient, understanding, supportive. I told myself love meant staying, especially when nothing was obviously broken. There were still moments when I felt close to him. Late at night, early mornings, when the world was quiet enough that there were no distractions, those moments felt precious, like proof. I held on to them. I let them outweigh everything else. I didn't feel unloved. I just didn't always feel chosen. But I didn't know how to say that without sounding dramatic, so I said nothing. Another small question surfaced one night, uninvited. When was the last time he asked how I was? And really waited for the answer? I couldn't remember. That scared me a little, but not enough to speak. Nothing bad ever happened. That's what I would have said if someone asked. And maybe that was true. There were no fights, no betrayals, just a slow, quiet shift. So slow that I didn't trust my own perception. I stayed because leaving required certainty, and I had none. I stayed because hope is easier than clarity, because as long as nothing was clearly wrong, everything could still be fixed. One night, we sat together watching a show we'd already seen before. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't pull away, just stayed still. His arm rested beside me, not around me. It was a familiar position, one we'd been in many times, but this time I noticed something new. I noticed how alone I felt inside the closeness, and I wondered, very quietly, was this how it had always been, or had something changed? I didn't know, and I didn't ask. Not yet. The episode ended. He reached for the remote. Life continued, and I stayed right where I was. After that night, nothing changed, and yet, something had already begun to. Not in a way I could point to. Not in a way that would make sense if I tried to explain it to someone else. Life continued with the same shape. We woke up. We went to work. We ate dinner together most nights. From the outside, we still looked like us, but inside me, something started to shift its weight. Quietly, gradually, almost politely. I became more careful with myself, not in an obvious way, just softer around the edges. I learned when to speak and when not to, when to bring something up and when to let it dissolve on its own. I told myself this was emotional intelligence, knowing when not to push, knowing when to give space. I didn't notice at first that the space I was giving was always mine. There were mornings when I woke up with something to say, a thought, a feeling, a question that had followed me through sleep. I was turned toward him. Sometimes he was already scrolling, sometimes already dressed, sometimes already elsewhere in his head. I would hesitate just for a second. Then I'd swallow the words and replace them with something smaller, something easier, something that didn't require much response. And every time I did that, I felt a strange mix of relief and loss. I started checking my phone more often, not because he wasn't replying, he always replied, just later than he used to, later enough that I noticed, not late enough to complain. I told myself I was imagining patterns. I told myself I was reading too much into timing. Still, I found myself glancing at the screen during the day, then feeling a little embarrassed about it, like I'd been caught wanting something I shouldn't. I didn't ask for more. I asked for less reassurance, less attention, less effort from him. I told myself I didn't need it, that needing it would make me weak, that love wasn't about being constantly held. So I learned how to hold myself quietly. There were moments when we were together, physically close, emotionally adjacent, sitting on the same couch, eating the same meal, sharing the same bed, but our inner lives didn't always overlap. He laughed at something on his phone. I smiled too, without knowing why. I didn't ask. I didn't want to interrupt the moment he was having, even if I wasn't part of it. A small question appeared one afternoon while we were walking side by side. If I weren't here right now, would anything feel different for him? I hated myself for thinking it. I told myself it was unfair. So I let the question fade without answering it. I began to notice how often I adjusted my mood to match his. If he was quiet, I became quieter. If he was distracted, I became less demanding of attention. If he seemed tired, I made myself easier to be around. I thought I was being considerate. I didn't realize I was slowly erasing my edges. I stopped sharing certain thoughts, not because he reacted badly. He didn't. He listened. He nodded. But there was a slight delay in his presence, like he was hearing me from another room. I started choosing which parts of myself were worth the effort. I chose the lighter ones. Sometimes, in the middle of a sentence, I'd notice his eyes drifting. Just briefly, just enough. I would keep talking anyway. I would finish the thought carefully, as if adding it mattered more than whether it landed. And when I was done, I'd feel oddly tired, as if I'd been carrying something fragile alone. I began apologizing more for interrupting, for talking too much, for needing clarification. I didn't remember doing that before, but now it felt natural, safer. Dinner became quieter, not silent, just less layered. We talked about logistics, plans, neutral things. I avoided heavier topics, not because they caused conflict, but because they seemed to float between us without anchoring anywhere. I didn't want to feel that again. Another small question surfaced late one night. When did I start feeling like my presence needed justification? I didn't know. And I didn't stay with the question long enough to find out. There were moments when he reached for me, his hand on my back, his fingers laced with mine. Those moments still mattered. I leaned into them. I let them convince me that I was wrong to worry, that closeness didn't have to be constant to be real. And I believed that, mostly, but I also noticed how often I was the one leaning, the one adjusting my position, the one closing the distance. He never pulled away. He just didn't always close it himself. I became very good at waiting for the right moment, waiting for his attention to feel available, waiting for the version of him that was fully present. That version still existed, just not all the time, and I told myself that was normal. Some evenings I would sit beside him and feel a quiet ache. Not sadness, not anger, just a sense of being slightly out of sync, like trying to walk next to someone whose pace kept changing by half a step. I kept adjusting. I wondered often if I was making too much of nothing, if I was creating a problem where there wasn't one. I replayed moments in my head, trying to see them from the outside. They all looked harmless. So I stopped trusting my internal reactions. I trusted appearances instead. Another question appeared during a drive home. If I asked for more right now, would I feel guilty immediately after? The answer came too quickly. That scared me. But I didn't say anything. I started measuring myself by how easy I was to love, how little I asked for, how well I could adapt. I told myself this was strength. I didn't see how small my world was becoming. There were days when I felt invisible, not ignored, just unnoticed, like furniture that belonged in the room but wasn't actively seen. I didn't bring it up. Because how do you explain that without sounding ungrateful? I caught myself rehearsing conversations I never planned to have, practicing how I would say things gently, then deciding not to say them at all. The practice alone felt exhausting. Sometimes, when he looked at me, I searched his face for something. Not love, that was there. I searched for recognition, for the sense that he knew where I was standing emotionally. I didn't always find it. I started feeling like I was orbiting him, close enough to be affected, far enough to feel alone. I didn't think of it that way then. I just felt tired. Another small question came while lying awake beside him. When was the last time I felt fully met? I stared at the ceiling, listened to his breathing, and told myself I was overthinking. I didn't want to be the person who complained about subtle things. I wanted to be grateful, understanding, easy. So I kept choosing silence, and silence became familiar. One evening, we sat together after a long day. Nothing special, just quiet. He was there, I was there, and yet I felt like I was standing slightly to the side of my own life, like I had shifted positions without realizing it, not pushed out, just misplaced. I noticed the feeling, held it gently, and let it pass. I didn't name it. I didn't question him. I only wondered, very softly, how did I end up standing here instead of where I used to be? I didn't have an answer, so I stayed, and the night went on. There wasn't a moment where everything suddenly made sense. No sharp realization, no sentence that landed like a verdict. It was quieter than that. It started as a subtle shift in how the days felt when I woke up. Not heavier, not lighter, just flatter. I noticed it one morning while standing in the kitchen, waiting for the kettle to boil. The sound of it filling with heat didn't annoy me anymore. It didn't comfort me either. It simply existed, and so did I. I didn't check my phone right away. Not because I was trying to be strong, just because I forgot to care. That's when I understood something had already changed, long before I was ready to name it. I moved through the house without thinking about who else might notice me doing so. I stopped adjusting my volume, my timing, my presence, not in protest, just in neutrality. I no longer entered rooms with the quiet hope that something might finally be different inside them. I used to feel my own thoughts rearranging themselves around you. Now they stayed where they were. There was no anger in it. Anger would have required energy. This didn't. It felt like reaching for a familiar light switch in the dark and realizing the room was already dim enough that you didn't need it anymore. You were still there. And so was I. But something essential had stepped back without announcing its departure. I stopped waiting for the right moment to say certain things, not because I had decided not to, but because the urgency dissolved. The words lost their sharp edges. They no longer pressed against my ribs, demanding release. I noticed how often silence filled the spaces where I once tried to build bridges. And for the first time, I didn't rush to cross it. Silence stopped feeling like something to fix. I didn't feel rejected. I felt uncalled. There's a difference. Rejection hurts because it pushes you away. This felt like being left exactly where you were, while the world simply continued elsewhere. I became aware of how carefully I had been holding myself together. How much effort it took to remain available, open, patient. Not outwardly, no one would have noticed. But internally, there was always a quiet tension, like holding a door open just in case someone decided to walk through. One evening, I let the door close. It didn't slam. It didn't creak. It just rested where it naturally fell, and I didn't rush to reopen it. The days continued in ordinary ways. Meals were cooked, laundry folded. Conversations happened without friction. From the outside, nothing had ended. From the inside, something had already completed its slow unraveling. I realized I no longer rehearsed conversations in my head. I no longer imagined different versions of the same interaction, where timing or tone might finally unlock something warmer. I stopped anticipating. That was the clearest sign. Anticipation had been the thread tying me to hope. Without it, everything felt oddly still. There was relief in that stillness, not joy, not freedom, just relief from the constant internal negotiation. I noticed how my body responded differently too. I slept without that faint tightness in my chest. I breathed deeper without reminding myself to. I laughed at small things without checking whether the sound of it mattered to anyone else. I didn't feel proud of this shift. I didn't feel ashamed either. It felt like setting down a bag I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years, and then being surprised by how light my hands felt afterward. Sometimes, in the evenings, I would sit alone and notice the absence of longing. Not the absence of love, but the absence of the reaching, the stretching, the subtle ache of always leaning forward. I wasn't leaning anymore, and because I wasn't leaning, I could finally stand straight. You didn't ask what had changed, and I didn't explain. There was nothing to explain without turning it into something bigger than it was. No single cause, no accusation, just a slow recalibration of where my center lived. I had stopped living slightly off balance. I began doing small things for myself without framing them as rewards or coping mechanisms. I didn't label them. I didn't narrate them internally. I simply did them because they felt appropriate. A walk after dinner, music playing in the background again, letting a thought end without chasing it. These weren't acts of self-care. They were acts of self-return. I noticed how little resistance there was now, how decisions came quietly instead of after hours of weighing invisible consequences. I stopped asking myself how something would land, how it might be perceived, whether it would disturb a fragile equilibrium. The equilibrium had already shifted. There is one moment, so ordinary it almost doesn't deserve mention, that confirmed everything. I was sitting across from you, listening to you talk about something neutral. Work, maybe. Plans. I don't remember the details. What I remember is realizing that I was fully present and completely unattached to the outcome of the conversation. I wasn't trying to be understood. I wasn't hoping for closeness to sneak in through the cracks. I wasn't bracing for disappointment. I was simply there. And I understood then that this was as far as my reaching went. Not because you had failed me, not because I had grown stronger, but because the part of me that used to wait had gently stepped aside. I didn't feel sad about it. Sadness implies loss. This felt more like completion. Something had run its course quietly, without ceremony. After that, I stopped marking time by emotional milestones. Days weren't good or bad anymore. They were just days, and that neutrality felt surprisingly kind. I didn't miss what I once wanted. I missed who I was when wanting felt alive, but even that softened over time. I started noticing other things instead, the way sunlight shifted across the floor in the afternoon, the way my shoulders relaxed when no one needed anything from me, the way silence could exist without feeling like a verdict. I realized that I had been translating absence as possibility for a very long time. Now, absence was just absence, and that was okay. There was no declaration, no packing of bags in the night, no dramatic distance created. Life simply rearranged itself around a quieter truth. I became more myself in spaces where I wasn't being mirrored back. I trusted my own reactions without checking them against someone else's temperature. I allowed thoughts to finish themselves without interruption. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was becoming unguarded in a way I hadn't been in years. And then, slowly, I stopped measuring love by how much room it took up inside me. I started measuring it by how much room it left me. There was a gentleness in that realization, not triumphant, not corrective, just accurate. Some nights, I would still think of you, not with longing, not with regret, just with recognition. You were part of a chapter that taught me the shape of my own endurance. But endurance was no longer my goal. I didn't need to survive love anymore. I needed to inhabit myself, and that happened not when I left, but when I stopped trying to stay in a way that erased me. If you're listening to this, and something in you feels familiar, if you recognize the quiet shift before the ending, the moment when questions stop forming, I want you to know this. You don't have to name it yet. You don't have to explain it to anyone. You don't have to decide what comes next. Sometimes the most honest change arrives without a sound, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is allow that silence to finish speaking. If you're standing there now, no longer reaching, not yet leaving, just breathing in the space between, stay there for a moment. There's something in that stillness that belongs only to you.